Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts. My guest today has over 50 years of experience in the world of martial arts and was widely acknowledged one of the world's foremost authorities on Jeet Kune Do. In 1973, he became the youngest and final member admitted into Dan Inosanto's fabled Backyard JKD training group in Bruce Lee's lifetime. He studied with and assisted Dan for over 13 years, mastering his skills and traveling nationally and internationally, while becoming Dan Inosanto's personal assistant for seminars and public exhibitions. In 1982, he became one of the first students to be awarded the prestigious title of full instructor under Dan Inosanto. Recognized for his knowledge and expertise and known as the teacher of teachers, his goal is to develop instructors who are equally passionate about Jeet Kune Do. His recent book, Liberate Yourself, How to Think Like Bruce Lee, and its accompanying workbook detail how individuals can apply philosophical tenets of self-actualization utilized by Bruce Lee to their own lives. He's used his skills in Hollywood, the world of professional sports, and so much more. Please welcome my guest today, Mr. Chris Kent. How are you doing today, sir?
Fine, thank you. I appreciate it, Brian.
I truly appreciate your time. I know how busy people can be, so when they're willing to do this, I truly, truly appreciate it.
Well, I enjoy it, and again, thank you for having me on.
Well, what we do with all my guests, I mentioned over 50 years of experience, but I want to know where it started. I want to know where that first interest in martial arts came from, maybe that first spark that kicked off your martial arts journey.
Sure. Well, actually, again, it goes back to that Bruce Lee is what ignited my flame of martial arts, so to speak. And I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time. My parents had emigrated to America, and I obviously myself with them. And I saw the Green Hornet television show, and there was something about Bruce Lee Kato that it just struck a resonant chord within me, and I just thought, I want to do that. I really want to study martial arts. So at the time, you're going way back, there were not very many schools at all, martial arts schools in Portland, Oregon. And my parents didn't have a lot of money at the time, so the ones that were available were kind of out of reach. So what I did was I started buying Black Belt magazine, looking at those magazine articles. I can still to this day remember the very first martial art paperback book that I bought, which was Masoyama's Karate. And it was, nice. I think it cost like $3.95, which back then was a good amount. So I saved my allowance and bought the book, and I knew nothing about it. I would just look at the book and stand in my bedroom in the mirror and hold the book open and try and make all of these poses and do the things there. But again, that was the start point for it. My martial art training began when I lived in Santa Monica. We had moved to Santa Monica, California. Okay. And I joined the YMCA because they had a very good judo and jiu-jitsu program, Danzanryu Jiu-Jitsu. And at the time, it was, you could join the YMCA for $20 for a year and do everything at the Y. So anyway, I did it specifically for the judo jiu-jitsu program. The sensei was Jim Nieto, and so I was there for a few years. Okay. I did Shotokan for just a couple of months because I got a slight knee injury playing soccer in high school. Went back to England, came back to the US, began training in 5 Animal Kung Fu system under Grandmaster Ark Wai Wong in Los Angeles, Chinatown. And during that time, I read 2 magazine articles, as I always say, Bruce Lee's Liberate Yourself from Classical Karate, and one by Dan Inosanto, Jeet Kune Do is Fast, Powerful, and Deceptive. And again, it's something about those 2 articles hit home with me, and I thought, I want to learn Jeet Kune Do. So I went about trying to figure out how to do it. And, that's sort of like how the journey began.
Wow. Two questions. First of all, do you still have that original paperback copy of Masuyama's book?
No, I don't have that.
Oh, darn.
I do have the Liberate Yourself and the Jeet Kune Do's First Powerful articles.
Oh, wow.
And they're all yellowed now, and I know you can get new copies of them, but so I still have those.
Okay.
But yeah.
And then the Judo Jiu-Jitsu, you said you were in for a couple of years. Anytime during that point, did you get involved in the competition at all? Did they have that back then, or was that more for just self-defense?
Yeah, we had one or two. The first competition I entered, I got like a third place medal in Randori, the freelance sparring things of that nature. But it wasn't like today where every weekend there's a tournament somewhere, or somebody's going somewhere. But yeah, I did a few of them, a couple of them, and what was available at the time.
Okay. And did you seem to enjoy it? I mean, was that because I know you said you also played soccer and stuff, so you did competitive sports. Did you enjoy the competition side of martial arts?
I did at the time because, there was the competitiveness, but there was still I'm just trying to think of the correct word. The martial arts still was held in the high esteem. So when I look at what goes on today, it's become combative sports and entertainment. So there was still the discipline there, things of that nature.
Okay.
And yeah.
Nice.
And so I did enjoy it.
Okay, cool. And then I got to ask, at that age and stuff, you went from, judo jiu-jitsu to, kung fu to Shotokan. In your mind back then, were you really noticing how different these arts were? I mean, because you talk about three very different styles. Do you remember some of the stuff that was maybe going through your head, going from a style that, almost completely ground-based to kung fu to Shotokan, very traditional? Do you remember some of the things going through your mind about those differences?
Well, again, it was just taking a look at things, and I had done the judo and jiu-jitsu, which I liked and I enjoyed, but I wanted to look at the Shotokan at the time because it was a major, had a strong base, in California as well. The Japanese JKA, I think it's called, Japan Karate Association. I had gone back to England, as a teenager, like I said, 17, and came back to America, and I was looking at what they had, and then I thought, well, why not look at Kung Fu? And there was different styles and systems, and as Grandmaster Ark Wong was noted because he was one of the he played one of the Shaolin priests in Kung Fu the TV series.
Oh, cool.
So you see him in the opening credits. He's throwing a shuriken. So I thought, well, this is honest to goodness Chinese kung fu. So I used to go there a couple of times during the week, and then also on Saturdays or Sundays and train. Yeah.
Nice. So then when you started seeking out Jeet Kune Do, how long did it take you to find Dan Inosanto? Did you find other people first? Kind of what led to that?
No. I got straight to Dan. I lived in Santa Monica, as I said, and the Black Belt magazine offices at the time were in Culver City, which was not too far of a drive, and again, especially at the time. Anyway, I read those articles, so I contacted Black Belt magazine via phone, and I said, I really am interested in Jeet Kune Do, and I read these articles, and they said, well, the only person that is teaching Jeet Kune Do at this time is Dan Inosanto, and he teaches out of a gym in his backyard in Carson, California, which is down by Torrance. And so I said, oh, do you have his phone number? And they, can you give me his phone number? And they said, no. But they said, but it's in the phone book. So I grabbed the phone book and I looked it up, and there was D. Inosanto, Carson, California. So I called, and at the time, Dan was also he was teaching the JKD, but he was primarily a physical education teacher at Malaga Cove Junior High School in Palos Verdes.
Okay.
So I would catch between times, and I would never get in there, and I would speak to his wife Sue Inosanto at the time, and she'd say, well, he's not there, So then I'd call back, and eventually I got to talk to him, and his response was, well, Chris, I only teach like 12 people at a time in my backyard, and I might be doing something a few months from now. And then he would always say, call me back in a week. So I put it on my calendar, and 1 week to the day I would call him back.
Nice.
And I'd talk to him and a little bit more here or there, and call me back in a week. And And this went on for a few weeks.
Okay.
And I guess I must have worn him down by some aspect, because I still remember in the middle of the conversation, and he goes, well, I tell you what, why don't you drive down tomorrow while the class is going on and talk to me? So the next day I drove from Santa Monica down to Carson and found my way, because it was in his backyard in a residential area, and met him, and we began a conversation sitting on like a bench while the class was going on, and he'd get up every now and then to have the class do something, and then he would talk, and he asked me all sorts of questions about my background, and and even, I mean, where I grew up, everything, and just a number of different questions, and then at the end of it, he said, okay, well, do you want to start working out? And I said, yeah. And he goes, okay, you can start training. So I've talked about it so often, but I can still to this day remember the feeling that I had when I left his school and was driving home, this thing of, oh yeah, I can't believe this. And so I immediately went out and bought some of the orange and blue baseball shin guards that were the only ones available at the time, and some Everlast boxing gloves and a mouthpiece. And that's how I began training,
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. And it's funny because you think about that, back then, I mean, nowadays everyone has unlisted phone numbers, or of course nowadays there's no phone book really, where you can find that stuff. But I mean, not really a similar situation, but myself, like about 20 years ago, I was in California on a family vacation, and I wanted to get my copy of the book, The Journey, the Kempo book, signed by some people when I was out there. And I wanted to get it signed by Ed Parker Jr. And I remember I had called his office, and they're like, well, he's not in the office today. You can maybe come by and like tomorrow and stuff. And I'm like, I'm leaving town. I'm driving back to Minnesota. And they call back like 10 minutes later and say, here, write down this address and he'll meet with you. And I thought they were giving me the office. He was going to come in, and like, no, it was home address. Drove over to his house and sat on his porch on a bench. And we talked for like 2 hours. And because of that, 20 years ago, he was like the third guest on my podcast 4.5 years ago. So yeah, nice. Some people are just, willing to give like that. And it's really cool that he was, took a shot on, I'm sure back then what he thought was a kid, he said a teenager, and it obviously worked out for both of you. So that's really cool. So then how often were you training with him? How often was he teaching in his backyard?
Twice a week. To go back to what you were just saying though, was the, thing about luck. I consider myself one of the most blessed, luckiest, whatever a person believes or wants, but one of the most blessed, luckiest people in the world, because of being able to get in. And I didn't find out till I think 3 years after I've been training there that Dan told me once. He goes, your name was 16th on a list. There were 15 people whose names were in front of yours and who wanted to train. Wow. And I was going through the list and just, talking. He was talking with my wife, Sue, and, this guy, Chris. And she goes, oh, well, he seems like a very polite, young English man, young teenager or whatever. So I don't know. Again, as I said, it's when I found that out, I was I managed to get in. And so I feel blessed by that,
I'd love to know who those other 15 names were.
Yeah, I know.
Who knows? I'm sure some of them probably went on with martial arts, and we probably heard of a few of them that we just don't know they were on that list.
It could very well be, So,
That is so cool. So then how long did he keep the backyard? Because I know at one point he opened an actual school. How long did the backyard dojo thing go on?
Well, I don't know exactly when it started. I began my training, because I can remember, and I have a note still so I began my training like June 3rd, 1973.
Okay.
And then Bruce passed away July 20th.
Yeah.
1973. And I remember calling Dan, because I was living with my parents, and I woke up and my dad goes, oh, on the news, Bruce Lee's dead. I was like, yeah, okay. He goes, no, put the news on. So I did, and then I immediately called Dan, and he was devastated.
Yeah.
And he went up for the funeral, and when he got back, he wasn't even sure that he was going to keep the school open or the gym open and going. And then thank God that he did. So that was why, again, like I said, July 20th. the Filipino Kali Academy opened around April or May of 1974.
Okay.
And most people are unaware that it didn't open as a Jeet Kune Do school.
Right.
It opened, hence the term the Filipino Kali Academy as well, so that Dan and Richard Bustillo could continue their investigations into the Filipino martial arts. Because at the time they were working with a number of different masters, Leo Hiron, Angel Cabales, later on with Ben Lagusa, things like that. So hence the name, the Filipino Kali Academy, and also because, Dan, there was no mandate about Jeet Kune Do, because I remember Dan telling me that Bruce said to him, when he was going to Hong Kong or whatever, I know you could probably make a lot of money teaching Jeet Kune Do, but I would be disappointed in you if you did. And so that was the thing. It's not that Dan told Bruce that he would never teach commercially. That was the whole thing, was that Bruce said, hey, I know you could make a ton of money, but I'd be disappointed. And so Dan always honored that. And I've said for years that had Dan Inosanto wanted to, he could have become a millionaire, numerous times over.
Yeah.
But that's not his nature. That's not who he is. So he honored what he felt Bruce would have wanted at the time. So there was no Jeet Kune Do name on the outside. Later on, the logo came out there and things like that. And so what happened was that obviously you have to have income to run a business or pay for rent on a business. So they began teaching what Dan liked to refer to as Jun Fan at the time. Mm-hmm. So there were 4 phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and then people would be voted into the Jeet Kune Do class.
Okay.
And the way Dan designed it, because he was a teacher, he said, look, I'm going to make this like going to college, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, so each material builds upon the previous material. And then, if a person has the right mentality as well as the physical skills, then their name would be put forth to be advanced in the Jeet Kune Do class. And the JKD class would vote on allowing them in or not. Later on, that became too difficult because there were too many people, and a lot of the seniors didn't know any of them. So then Dan and Richard made the decision.
Okay. Wow. That's such a cool story. I mean, wow.
Yeah. Well, again, like I said, he used the term Jun Fan martial arts,
right?
Because he goes, well, it's not Jeet Kune Do. The difficulty lies is that, and he goes, well, then, and even in some of the early articles, because I have so many going back, he'd say, well, they're not learning Jeet Kune Do, they're learning this and learning modified Wing Chun. But what you would see is, as I've explained before, is, if you took a trapping action like a Ping Choi Gua Choi Lop Sao, the JKD guys would be doing that. And then the guys would be doing it just at a more basic level in the other classes. So what's the difference? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But that was just, again, he wanted to make sure that people had the correct attitude to go into the Jeet Kune Do class,
right. Okay. Now, I said in the intro that in 1982 is when you became an official instructor, and got that the title. At what point in your training, in those 9 years up until then, did you decide that was something you wanted to do? Was teaching on your mind for a while, or was it just something where Dan said, "Hey, I think you'd be good at this. I'm going to make you an instructor"? Kind of what led to that love of teaching?
Oh, no. I've written before, when I was 17 and a half and I began in Jeet Kune Do, I knew that I had found my passion. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said, it struck a resonant chord with me. I knew that I loved this, and I hoped that one day I might be in the position of being able to teach other people that.
Okay.
But that wasn't on my mind at the time. Mm-hmm. That certification was not on anybody's mind at that time. The first certificate I ever received, I actually got a couple in the Filipino arts, first from Angel Cabales, but the first certificate I ever got from Dan was in 1977. And it, had my name on it, and he says, has completed 576 hours in the art and science of Jeet Kune Do. And I said, boom, okay, here's a certificate. You've got 576 hours in Jeet Kune Do.
Nice.
I thought, okay, that wasn't on people's mind. It wasn't about getting a piece of paper or getting certified. People just did it because they loved doing it.
Right.
I assisted Dan teaching the classes.
Mm-hmm.
My movement into teaching was very organic. It wasn't, you have to take these classes and you should go fulfill this. I learned to teach standing side by side with Dan.
Nice.
And he'd be watching the class and he'd go, okay, Chris, what's that guy doing wrong with regard to his footwork? And I'd watch and I'd say, well, he's doing this. He goes, yeah, okay, go help him out. Why is this guy having a problem with this trapping action? Well, because this. Yeah, okay, go help him out. So that's how I learned to teach. And then traveling with Dan and assisting him, oftentimes you learn more about Jeet Kune Do going out to dinner or spending time traveling than you did in the classroom, you know, because that was just the nature of it. So, like I said, it was very organic. I knew that I loved it. This was my passion and that I hoped to be able to teach it. But we just went on and we did what we did. And then in 1982, there was no elaborate ceremonies or anything. When people were advanced from, say, phase 2 to phase 3 or phase 3 to phase 4, there was no ceremony. Dan would just walk up to them and put his hand on their shoulder or whatever, and he'd go, okay, Brian, you've really been doing great. You've done the work. As of Tuesday, you're in phase 4, Nice. So that was it. So my certificates, I turned up to train in the class. Dan was teaching the class, and he goes, "Oh, there's something for you in the office." So I walked into the office, and my friend and senior JKD guy, Bud Thompson, was in there. I said, "Dan said there's something in here for me." And he goes, "Oh yeah." Opens a drawer, pulls out an envelope, throws it to me, throws it across the table. He goes, "Dan said to give you these." So I opened them, and yeah, it's full instructor, Kung Fu martial arts 1, Filipino martial arts 2. I said, "Oh, okay, that's cool." Put it back stuck it in my bag, went out and trained.
That's awesome.
That was getting your certificates. Now, when you say that, that doesn't mean they were not highly valued.
Oh yeah, no, right? Definitely.
I was over the moon, but that was the prevailing attitude at the time.
Yeah.
Richard was an amazing guy, and he and Dan were like yin yang. They were the perfect fit. Richard would go, "Yeah, okay, well, want to see what rank you are? We'll glove up and go out on the floor." That was Richard, So that was just like I said, that was the culture. That's why when I write about it, there was a JKD culture, a set of values, a mindset, an attitude, a way of looking at things that was incredible.
You talked about writing a few times. What led to that? What led to the love of writing, and kind of how did you start that part of your career?
Well, I always kind of liked writing. I wrote, some little short stories in school. I think everybody does, right? You're in a class, teacher tells you to write something. So I saw some articles, and, again, it was like, well, I discussed it with Dan first, because again, you're talking of a time where you did not wear your school t-shirt out on the street. And again, people who come from other arts at the same time, that was the attitude, the prevailing attitude, right? You don't go down the street with your shirt on. So you don't just write something. So again, I discussed it with Dan and said, there's some really interesting ideas here. And he was kind of like, well, why don't you just put them forward? And because I was traveling with him and, as in some of the earlier books with him, I was familiar with the publications, Black Belt publications, people there, and Know Now publications. So they asked me about doing it. And so, of course, I would make sure I had permission first. But it was always something to me of well, I love it. How can I share these ideas with people, It's not about making people think this particular way. It's about just sharing an idea about JKD training to help people get a clearer picture of it. So we, did a few of those, and then we were approached by Know Now and some of the other guys about doing other books. And at the time, because I still remember standing out in the parking lot with Dan and Tim Tackett and myself, and Larry Hutzel was there, and we were talking about writing books. And again, Dan said, "Look, I made this pledge to Bruce that I would never do this and that and the other thing," even using the name Jeet Kune Do, right? Because it wasn't out there. But everybody else in the world was doing it. He goes, "Look, I made this pledge to Bruce, but you guys didn't. And you guys have the understanding about it. So why not? Why should you not write about it?" So as we were talking about it, and the idea was that nobody wanted to step on anybody else's toes. So it seemed really ridiculous to have four different people come out with four different JKD books at the same time.
Right.
So it was sort of like Tim Tackett and I, because we had a good working relationship, was, well, why don't we do one on the kickboxing aspect of Jeet Kune Do, which was actually supposed to be a series of about 3 or 4 of them. And Larry, because of his grappling background, yeah, I'll take the grappling aspect of it, So that then, like I said, there wouldn't be 4 books on all of these elements of Jeet Kune Do coming out by 4 different people.
Right.
So that was the way in which these books evolved. As I said, Tim and I were initially looking at doing a series of about 3 or 4 on the kickboxing element, because the one we did is just a pure basic one.
Mm-hmm.
But then as it progressed, Tim and I had talked about it and everything that was going on at the time, and said, it would really be good to attempt to share what it's really all about, the art and the science behind it. And that's how the textbook evolved, because one of my favorite quotes, and we put it in the textbook, that Bruce wrote in his notes, was, "The art is both a science and an art. Knowledge of the art is the science. Doing of the art is the art." And, as you know,
yeah.
He was very involved with fitness training, psychology. So we did a lot of research into the material from Bruce's notes. We went through Bruce's notes and then investigated them and then researched them. And so that's how the textbook came out, a couple of years later. And then again, it just progressed from there, and writing articles. And to me, the thing was, if you can write articles that make people think about things, share ideas, but make people think about things. Mm-hmm. Not just here's a finger jab, here's a side kick, and things like that. So that was always my approach to writing, was, what am I going to write? What am I going to say? I know, you're never going to please everybody. Somebody'd be upset. But I had a writing mentor in California who told me, look, if you're not pissing off at least 20% of the people who are reading what you're writing, you're not doing your job correctly. So
I like it.
I kind of took that to task, okay. And I enjoy writing. I still do, and I'm an old school person. I write with a pen and a yellow pad.
Nice.
And from there I'll edit when I type. I enjoy the feel of writing, with a pen, and I know, again, a lot of people today don't. They were not brought up that way, but
yeah.
A good pen and a yellow pad. And it works with my frame of thinking. So that's I still to this day, that's how I write.
And I started my first book about a year ago, and I'm not making great progress on it, because every time I sit in front of a computer, I think I should be working on my podcast. And I actually, literally about a month or so ago, I had the idea, maybe I should try it with pen and paper and see if I'll do better. So that's my plan. I'm going on a trip in February on a vacation, and I plan on bringing a few notebooks and some pens with me and see if I can maybe get a good portion of my book done just by writing it that way. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I actually became the Jeet Kune Do. I always like to say, because I actually became a better student of everything after I got into Jeet Kune Do, because I learned a different way of learning than what I'd been brought up with. Okay. I was I was an average C student. Mm-hmm. Didn't do this, and I didn't believe in this, and I didn't like that, but also because coming up in a British family, which is, I'm not saying it in a negative way, but I was raised with this thing about anything worth doing is worth doing well.
Yeah.
So when I would write things, anytime there was a spelling mistake, I'd correct it. Anytime there was a grammatical error, I'd correct it. And that would bog me down. And I had to relearn an entirely different way of writing, to where now I just put dashes between sentences. Misspelling doesn't matter. All that stuff will be fixed later on.
Right.
But I had to relearn that, and and again, think to JKD principles, hack away the unessentials. Well, as a writer, there's a famous saying: you have to kill your darlings. So it's sort of like, but I want that piece in there because I really like it. Yeah, but it doesn't work. So it's something I like to do.
That's cool.
And hopefully I can share. Again, it's a way of me sharing things. I like to write too. I like doing videos, and because we live in a video world now, and things like that. But what I love about books is that five people can read the same paragraph in a book and have a different image in their mind. And I think reading, listening to things, it really forces your mind your imagination to work,
Yeah.
So that's why I like it so much.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what led to you getting involved in Hollywood and doing some, stunt stuff and fight choreography?
Well, I have to give credit to my JKD training partner, Jeff Amata, for that.
Yep. I've heard of Jeff.
Dan had been doing stuff off and on. Jeff Amata had worked his way up from an extra on TV shows and movies and had gone into stunt work because of some shows at the time and had developed himself into a very accomplished fight choreographer and stunt coordinator. And then he approached me about doing it was a spin-off episode for Chips, and it was called 4-7 with Fred Dreyer, who eventually went into the Hunter TV series. But this one, anyway, it was a TV show. And, and then at the time, there's a catch-22 in Hollywood is that you cannot get your Screen Actors Guild card unless you work on a SAG show, but you can't work on a SAG show unless you have a Screen Actors Guild card.
Yep.
But there was a loop in it where if you had specialized skill. So Jeff brought me into that. So I did that with him, and then he got me another couple of jobs. And through that, I met people. And then also when I had my school, I started training people and running into them. I found out that one of my students who I was in my, when I was still teaching at Dan's place, but in my class, created the Miami Vice television show. And I had no idea at the time. So he became a private student of mine. And so it just kind of went that way. But again, I always want to give credit because it was Jeff Amata that opened that door for me and even got me probably the biggest job I did was a movie on knife fighting down in Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
Because he had another job, he couldn't take it. So he said, "Hey, you want to do this for me?" And so I did. So, again, I owe him a lot.
That's cool. And then what about, I mentioned you also started training with like some sports teams and the San Francisco 49ers. How did that come about?
Well, the 49ers came about with Tim Tackett. But before that, we had some different people. There was a basketball player when I was helping Dan he had a small school in Culver City. There was a basketball player named Kiki Vanderway, who was an NBA player.
Yep.
And then there were some other ones. And then, of course, Dan became connected with the Dallas Cowboys. And the way he became connected with that is Bob Ward was the strength and conditioning coach for Dallas Cowboys. Mm-hmm. His brother, Paul Ward, was Dan's college roommate. And so all of a sudden, Bob was very, very forward-thinking and things like that. And Bob was actually brought into our JKD class. There's a picture of us all. I've used it several times where we're all skipping rope. And there's a big muscular guy kind of off to the left behind me. And that's Bob Ward. And Dan brought him into the class. And so then Dan started working with the Dallas Cowboys and Randy White and some of the other guys. So it just kind of blossomed out from there, and the word of mouth would come by. And I believe Tim had worked with the 49ers before and then asked me to go up and work with them. So yeah, I worked with them twice. We worked pass rushing. I believe it's called pass rushing, where you're trying to get to the quarterback.
Okay.
Right. So it was this thing where there's 3 seconds from the time the ball snapped till it's airborne. We've got to get round these guys and get to it. So a lot of hand movement, some foot movement and things like that. But again, an interesting take on being able to take some JKD principles and put them to use. In fact, Bob Ward did an article, Jeet Kune Do on the Gridiron, and I still have it somewhere.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. And I definitely want to talk about, I was reading that you were one of the co-founders of the Bruce Lee Educational Foundation. Definitely talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, the impetus for it, actually, the idea, one of my closest friends is Cass Magda, who's a great martial artist, a JKD person, Penjoxilat. We've been friends for years, and there was so much going on around the world with JKD that was misperceptions, miscommunications, outright falsehoods that he and I were sitting around hashing things over for a number of times. And we started just putting all notes together. What would we do if we could do this? And And so we came up with this idea, and our name was originally the Lee Junfan Fellowship. We chose the word fellowship not from a religious context, but from the idea that you can become a fellow of photography, where you're respected for having a high level of scholarship and knowledge in a particular thing. So, a person can be a fellow of photography, as I said. So we were doing that, and Linda Lee Cadwell and I have been good friends since about a year after Bruce passed away.
Okay.
And she had been seeing different things, and because we had talked, and about some of this stuff seems to be so far off base, and so, she goes, I don't recognize this as Bruce's kind of thinking or ideas. So I broached a subject with her about what Cass and I were doing, and it evolved from there. And she goes, well, I think it would be a good idea to create something like this. And the idea behind it eventually became the Bruce Lee Foundation, the Bruce Lee Educational Foundation, because there was so much, again, it became so misperceived. The solitary idea behind creating the Bruce Lee Educational Foundation was to give the public the clearest, most accurate picture of what Bruce Lee was doing in his lifetime and his martial direction. Not, this is his martial art, it can't be changed, you must do this.
Right. But
what his frame of thinking was, what his way of analyzing things was, all of that. That was the premise behind this foundation, was to create a wellspring of information so that people could go to a place where they knew that they would get, again, true information regarding Bruce. I have to follow that with the fact is I'm not saying that there weren't other people giving people truth,
right.
Because every time I say something like this, somebody's going to come out, well, you're saying this. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this is why it was created. This is how it was created. And so it was put together, and there were a group of people, and we met in Seattle because that was Bruce's first place. And Linda was there, Talkie was there, Dan was there, Daniel Lee, Larry Herzl, myself, Tackett, a number of people, Ted Wong, this group was there. We came together, we talked about issues that were occurring in the Jeet Kune Do world and creating, again, it wasn't even really an organization. Like I said, it was to become a foundation, and the ideas were put forth. And so that was how it came into existence. And then the name, that was about the second meeting, but the name Junfan Jeet Kune Do with no hyphen it, because if you look at even my book, the textbook, there was a slash, Junfan / Jeet Kune Do. And we differentiated in the book of how the things came about. But Talkie, his thing was Junfan Gung Fu, and that's what he called it, because that's what I do. I don't do Jeet Kune Do. And then there was Jeet Kune Do. And I believe it was Shannon, because we were tossing around ideas, was saying, well, why don't we use Junfan Jeet Kune Do? Because Junfan is Bruce's name,
yep,
and Jeet Kune Do is his art, no hyphenate. And so the term Junfan Jeet Kune Do was adopted to represent the material that Bruce was doing at the time and developed from there. It wasn't just, okay, do whatever you want. So it was simply to help people get an understanding. And so that was the thing is, there's a saying that secure people seek to educate, insecure people seek to indoctrinate. And the idea was specifically to avoid that. This was not an organization that indoctrinated people. It was an organization or a group that educated people.
Right.
And that's how it came into existence.
Nice.
Yeah.
Talk about your current website and what people can, from the ckjkd.com, what people can get on that site and some things they can experience.
Well, I designed the website to cover both aspects of what I do, the martial component, if you will, of the Jeet Kune Do, and then the dynamic personal liberation, which is all built around my book and my workbook and my work as a consultant in that avenue. And they both interrelate. They're not completely separate, because as we know, they fit
right
together. But again, the point is that for me, moving into the direction of serving as a consultant for people. That doesn't mean, yeah, I can still teach people,
Mm-hmm.
but working with schools, working with private individuals, working with schools on everything from training methodology to philosophical foundations to creating fluid curriculum ideas so that I can share Jeet Kune Do as I feel it is to me,
Okay. Yeah.
because it's not just a physical art, it's not just a philosophy, it is a state of being, if you will, an understanding of it. So to work with those, both, like I said, with schools, and it allows me to go to anybody, which is why one of the things I put on my website is that I don't fall into this thing of JKD concepts or original JKD and blah 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 blah. Those are issues that I get involved with. This is what I do. And the only reason it's called Chris Kent Jeet Kune Do is because it is me and Jeet Kune Do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I didn't call it Chris Kent's Jeet Kune Do.
Right.
It's just Chris Kent Jeet Kune Do. Bang. And I can do it the way that I feel it deserves to be done. The way I feel that Jeet Kune Do deserves to be promoted as a stand. It's hard to say when I say as a standalone art.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what I mean? Because
yeah.
So many people have Velcroed or boxcard the name onto a bunch of other things that they do. And that's up to them. And I don't go down that path. But to me, Jeet Kune Do, it is this whole idea of totality in martial arts. So what does that mean and how do I help people? So I can go to a non-Jeet Kune Do school and share with them,
right?
And I can go to a JKD concepts school and share with them. And I can go to an original JKD school and share with them. And they can take what they, absorb what works for them, whatever. So that's the martial component of it. And I find too that the teaching privately allows you to go the direction I want to go a little bit more as well. Right. So that's why I've shifted to a lot of that. And then, as I said, the dynamic personal liberation came because I've been wanting to write that book for probably 30 years. And I had notes that I put together because I just thought how much of this philosophy, this idea, this way of looking at martial arts could be applied to life. And it was actually my friend John Little who finally gave me the kick up the behind to do it, because he was up here in Boise
mm-hmm.
and living at the time and working for the foundation. And I was going on and on about it. And he goes, Chris, then you just have to sit down and do it and just do it. So I did. And then, he looked at it because we've been very close, and he would review it and we talk about different things. And he goes, one time he looked at it, he goes, Chris, this is your magnum opus. This is your baby. All of the other books you've done, he goes, they're great books and everything, but it is this art and it is this other thing. This is your baby. And I was always really happy about that,
Mm-hmm.
But that was the idea, was to share with people how Bruce, as he developed this martial art, a non-restrictive approach to martial art and to training, he developed this personal, non-restrictive philosophy towards life and living,
Yeah.
So then doing that book and then the workbook and then doing workshops on that and speaking engagements, the TEDx talk and things like that allowed me to cover or go down that avenue as well. So, and I love them both.
Mm-hmm.
But that was always, I'd been wanting to do that for so many years. And it's finally that John who was like, no, just do it. So I did.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So over your 50 plus years in the martial arts, is there one philosophy that's at the top of your list?
I don't really think so. I mean, I'm sure everybody loves to say the be like water, be water,
mm-hmm.
my friend, because there's been so forth.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. But in order to be like water, you have to understand the nature and characteristics of water.
Yep.
It's not just, we'll just be fluid and do with, go with the flow. Even a dead fish can go with the flow.
True.
So I think the fundamental things of the logo, the using no way as way, having no limitation as limitation,
mm-hmm.
is still at the benchmark, because it can apply to everything in your life, whether you're talking martial arts, whether you're talking about music, you get musicians who say, well, no, you can't cross jazz with rock. You can't do that. And Bruce would just look and go, ha, so,
Yep.
and so I take that approach that I think that is the thing. But having a good understanding of that quote, the philosophy of that quote is very important. Using no way as way doesn't mean anything can become your way,
right,
or that you can do whatever you want and toss it in. Because I would have people when they would say, well, I'm doing Jeet Kune Do concepts, and like I said, I'm not going to get into an argument about people, but I go, well, what are you doing right now? And they go, well, because it was like bizarre. And I would go, well, I'm doing Jeet Kune Do concepts. And I would go, well, do me a favor. Tell me what concept it is you're doing and explain it to me, just so that I know. Because using no way as way doesn't mean I can just throw everything in when I want to do. It means not allowing yourself to be, again, confined by any way, rigidity of thought, rigidity of action, rigidity of belief, that I'm not using any one way. This is my way, and then having no limitation is limitation. But we're all going to have limitations, I don't think anybody's going to be able to go out and jump up like the Superman, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound type things. You're going to hit, if you're weight training, you're going to hit a weight that you will not be able to move. That's not what it means. It's about not allowing usually self-made limitations, be they physical or mental or emotional,
right,
to limit you or restrict you. So that's why, to me, that's the full understanding of that quote can be applied to any aspect of your life. And then the yin yang, the usage of the yin yang, is the way to live life.
Mm-hmm.
It's constantly moving, constantly adapting. 80-20 one time, 70-30 another time, but both components are necessary. So the idea of the principle of the interfusion of yin yang,
mm-hmm,
and the using no way as way, having no limitations, limitation, I think to me are two of the highest philosophical principles that they can apply to JKD, and B, they can apply to every single thing that we do.
Nice. So do you have a worst martial arts related injury?
I've never had major one. I've never had, like, friends I know have had their knee torn out.
Yep.
Or, like arm broken and things like that. So I had minor ones, but when I had my school in Venice, California, I was working out with one of my assistant instructors, and we were working on some grappling material because at the time, too, I was training privately with John Machado.
Nice.
For a period of time, I was working on it was about when getting out of some kind of neck crank.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember what it was exactly. Anyway, it was about creating a frame, and then you use, because he's still got his arms wrapped around your neck, and then pressing down, pushing your weight into his neck, which will force him to release the lock. Well, I was doing it with my student, and I made the error. There were two errors. One, he really cranked it on when I did it, but two, instead of making the frame and pressing down, I made a mechanical error. I pressed down a little bit, but then I pulled up with my body. And when I did, I heard this pop back in my neck,
Dang.
And I thought, oh crap, and it hurt. And I fell back on the floor, and I thought, crap, I've broken my neck. And I was laying there, and I was going, okay, I can still feel my fingertips. Okay, I can still move my toes. Okay, I can still move my eyes. So it took me about 15 minutes to get up.
Wow.
Because, I didn't want to do anything, and my neck just hurt. And I didn't have health insurance at the time, but I had a chiropractor
mm-hmm.
who we exchanged. I trained him, and then he took care of me, but he had an x-ray machine. So I went to him, and he took x-rays, and he goes, no, you haven't done anything to your neck. Your neck's okay. He goes, but the pop you heard was you tore your rhomboid muscle, and you pulled a rib attachment loose from the spine.
Dang.
A little bit. And so he goes, so yeah, but if you do what I tell you to do in terms of how you train and how you recuperate, you'll be fine. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, I was back in the gym weight training.
Wow.
But it's still, every once in a while, I'll do something and it'll remind me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Dang. That's a good
that
one.
was that was a terrifying thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But other than that, I've been, the minor things that, you're going to get certain things.
Oh yeah, sprains and
But
stuff.
I also believe in, but I also believe in training hard, but training intelligently.
Yeah.
So even at my school as a teacher, I have very, very strict, safety policies. And if you don't abide by them, you're done.
It's good.
Yeah.
Nice. What are your thoughts on something like MMA and the UFC? Is that something you're a fan of?
I like good MMA.
Okay.
I like good fights. It is combative sport. What I don't like is that it's become like WWF.
Yep, exactly.
Where everybody has to become a character.
Yeah.
Everybody has to badmouth everybody else. I do not care for it, and I blame Don King from the boxing days of getting these guys together, and they all have to fight every time they're at a weigh-in.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's become so pedestrian, that, okay, good, we're going to have a meet, they're going to look at each other, somebody slaps somebody else. It's boring.
Yeah.
And it says nothing. When you had guys like Matt Hughes and George St. Pierre, and there are great fighters today, but they would go and meet, who is it, Machida? Is that his name?
Yeah, Lyoto Machida.
Yeah, and you'd see it, and if he knocked the guy down, he'd immediately go, or he'd kneel down by him. There was a certain respect there.
Yeah.
And now it just seems to be about, well, we got to sell the tickets, so we got to, wear our hats sideways, and we've got to be gangster, and we've got to be this. That I do not enjoy. Seeing two professional combative athletes do things well, yes. It's like watching good Muay Thai, And the thing I've always admired with respect with the Muay Thai is the respect that is so often showed most times, between the combatants. I mean, they're brutal in the ring, but, so, the UFC is just one of the things that brought MMA out.
Yeah.
If you remember that when MMA first began, and all of the guys, even Joe Rogan, when they were first doing the announcing, and the guy would come in and they go, oh, such and such, yes, well, he studies Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Western boxing, etc. And so they'll always be like, well, MMA has morphed into its own entity now.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I admire any professional combative athlete, just like professional boxing. What I don't is all of the theatrics that are built around it.
Yeah.
Now.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. I mean, I had the distinct honor, and I call it an honor because of all the people working in Hollywood and doing all the stuff I did in Hollywood and the security for my friend's supper club and all this. I got to meet so many people, but the one that made me feel like a 5-year-old kid, so full of excitement, I got to meet Muhammad Ali.
Oh, wow.
When he came to the dinner club that I was director of security of. And I say this with all honesty, and I don't care what anybody says. Dan used to say about Bruce, he goes, Bruce could walk into a room and everybody would turn and look.
Mm-hmm.
It was like this energy came in. When Muhammad Ali came up, the door opened of his car, and I swear this energy came out of the car before he even stepped out of it.
Wow. And
he didn't talk much because, was it Parkinson's?
Yep, Parkinson's.
Yeah, he didn't talk much, but I got to shake his hand, and I felt like a 5-year-old kid who had met their idol.
Wow. And
I know that, the only reason I'm saying that is because I know that back in the day, he would always make poems and stuff, right? But the thing with Muhammad Ali is he did everything that he said he was going to do.
Exactly.
And then he was very polite so many other times. So, those type of people I admire, and the good boxers. And there are a lot of good MMA people today.
Yeah.
And that's why I said the other stuff, that's most times I will turn the sound down. If I watch MMA fights, I turn the sound down because I don't need to hear the guy blasting about this person and that person and,
Yeah.
Same with boxing matches.
Yep, I agree. All right. I have a few fun questions we use to wrap up the interview. So obviously we were just talking about MMA and stuff. So let's say you decided you were going to step into the octagon. What's your walk-up music going to be? What song's playing as you're taking that walk into the cage?
I thought you were going to ask me if I was going to use a walker to get into the cage. I'm up there, man. I'm up there in age.
But maybe a younger you. Just what song is it? What song's going to play?
Oh, what song would be there? God, there's so many of them. God, maybe Queen's "Who Wants to Live Forever."
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's just, their stuff was so good. My brother was a musician, so I grew up with with rock.
Okay.
So it would probably have to be a rock, one something by Peter Gabriel,
Okay.
somebody like that.
I like
Yeah,
it.
that's on the spot, man.
Yeah, that's okay. All right. Who are 3, 4, 5 names you'd put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Well, I would put Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm.
I would put Dan Inosanto
Definitely.
because of everything that the man has done with regards to Jeet Kune Do and the Filipino martial arts. Because I'm just going to preface this because in the same way that, and it's not being derogatory, the same way that Wing Chun, which is a great art, like I said, had such worldwide popularity is because of one individual.
Yeah.
And that individual was Bruce Lee.
Yep.
And in the same way that the reason that the Philippine martial arts has such worldwide popularity and has exploded worldwide today is because of one man, and that man is Dan Inosanto.
Agreed.
And as I said, it doesn't mean that there aren't good people and fantastic people in these. What I'm saying is that those are the prime reasons.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I would say Bruce and Dan. Man, there are so many others. I mean, you could almost put Ed Parker up there.
Yeah.
If you're going, Masoyama. It's hard because I'm looking from from a non-JKD perspective.
Yep.
There are so many. Uyeshiba from Aikido. These are, so many of these are men that became landmarks, if you will.
Definitely.
So I know Dan and Bruce would be there. The other ones I'd have to, between Uyeshiba, but the people who have had dramatic effect on martial arts.
Like a global impact type thing. Yep.
Yeah. And also in a positive way.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Now this one obviously can't pick your own. Favorite martial arts book?
Favorite martial arts book? Oh, that's an easy one, actually.
Yeah.
Zen and the Martial Arts by Joe Hyams.
Nice. That's my pick too. I love it.
Yeah, I think that book has so much related to not only Jeet Kune Do, but martial arts in general.
Yeah.
That would be my pick. Yes.
Yeah. Joe Hyams is one that I wish I could have interviewed before he passed away. I would have loved to have met him and just sat down and had a conversation.
Yeah. He was training with, he's a fellow martial artist, a man named Mark Makita, who trained in my classes when I was teaching with Dan at the Marina School, and then opened his own school, and is a very prominent martial artist in his own right. But Joe became one of his private students.
Oh, okay.
So I think I met him once.
Nice.
I met so many of these people like once, Sterling Silafont,
oh wow,
and all of these guys. But anyway, Mark was training Joe for a while.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now this one you may not have an answer for. Do you have a favorite martial arts video game?
You got me there because I don't even do any video games.
Okay.
I know nothing about video games.
That's okay.
Yeah, I know people tell me, well, what about this? What about that? All I know is this. When I go back, my brother, was doing all those kind of things. He's a computer person. And when whatever Mike Tyson's boxing came out in the day, that kind of stuff. Well, my brother would go and, well, let's have a fight. And I would lose. I would just get knocked out. I would get destroyed.
Yep. And
he'd go, see it? And I go, yeah, okay. Now here's the thing. You and I are going to go into the garage and we're going to put on a pair of boxing gloves each. And then we're going to see, just how much Mike Tyson can help you out. So yeah, I honestly don't know any of them. And with this explosion of AI, God only knows where it's going to go.
Exactly. Oh, that's okay. All right. How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
Favorite martial arts TV show. Jesus, do they have them?
I mean, people pick anything from Green Hornet to Kung Fu to Sidekicks in the 80s, Highlander in the 90s.
Well, Martial Law was pretty good. I thought Martial Law.
Sammo Hung. Yes, that was a great show.
Sammo Hung, because he's a great martial artist, know? And the Green Hornet, I looked at some Green Hornet TV shows the other day and, they're so cheesy, just like the Batman shows and stuff. But when you were there watching them as a kid, like I said, I remember it was like so cool. Yeah. But and the Kung Fu show we used to make fun of it just because it was so like, oh, well, wait, he cannot have a fight until he has a flashback. Yeah. So, but it did bring in some good philosophy. Yes. So I like that. But I did like Sammo Hung as martial law. Yeah, that was really good. Now, have you watched the Warrior, the one Shannon worked on? I have not. I have seen bits of it, and I hear it's very good. It's amazing. I can tell you, if you got a second, I
Yeah.
can tell you a really great thing is I was in an event. I went to an event with Linda and Bruce Cadwell.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I went to an event in Seattle, and Andre Morgan was there, and a group of other people. And Andre got up to speak, and I think it might have been one of the Nucleus banquets. Anyway, he was talking about the fact that how Bruce, the whole thing about the Kung Fu TV series and not getting it.
Yeah.
And supposedly because he was too Chinese, right? We have to have this. And he said, so you had that back then. He said, well, we can't do it because he's too Chinese that the public won't buy it. And he was, I guess, one of the producers of martial law, right?
Yeah.
And he said, so that's back then. And when we're doing martial law, the whole thing was, we don't care who it was, but they have to be Asian. They have to be a true representation of Asian people and be able to do martial arts. Because I kind of felt it was justified Bruce.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Now, how about a favorite martial arts movie?
Ooh, favorite. Well, you got Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, it's the plot is okay. Yeah. By far, it's still the essence of human combat.
Yes.
There are others. I like so many of the Asian movies. I'm a huge John Woo fan.
Yep.
Chow Yun-fat is my favorite actor in the world.
Nice.
So when I see shows like that, and I'm a huge Jackie Chan fan.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see those type of movies, and especially the new ones, they're great. So yeah, I'm trying to think. Enter the Dragon, like I said, I still like Way of the Dragon as well.
Yeah.
And I know it's, but I saw the Chinese version, which has all the different stuff in, and
Mm-hmm.
I like that. For give and take all the lower quality filmmaking stuff.
Yeah.
I know that's Linda's favorite movie of
Okay.
Bruce's.
Nice.
But Enter the Dragon, when you look, and you have, I think the prime thing is you have to keep in context of when it was made.
Yeah.
And what was going on at the time in martial art movies. And because it's very easy, like I would talk to people about it. And I used to have this argument with my father because my brother being a musician and my dad, he's older in English, and how can you listen to that? You can't understand the words and you can't do this. And I would always go, Dad, you cannot listen to now music with thin ears.
Right.
You have to listen, right? Well, you can't look at that movie Enter the Dragon with now eyes and perception, with all the CGI and everything that goes on.
Yeah.
But when you look at it as a film that is just the expression of human body in combat, it's still one of the best all around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
but
yeah.
it's funny you mentioned like CGI and AI and stuff. That's one thing I wish they would almost do is take Game of Death, how they finished it with after Bruce died, and go back and use some actual good CGI and finish it and see how much better it would look, just graphically, how much better it would look.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, I told you John Little was up here and then he did that documentary, A Warrior's Journey, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And I saw that from the time it was 2 VHS cassettes that we'd watch over at his house, to the rough cuts, to the adding of the music. So I saw it from day one to day when it finished. All of Bruce's notes, because he had access to it, all of Bruce's notes on it. So it would have been interesting. And obviously, you got to remember, this is 1972.
Yeah.
So, the words, hey, man, and, hey,
Yep.
can we groove? It was like so, whoa, back then. But it would have been interesting to see it completed, because I'm sure it would have changed somehow.
Oh, agreed.
And so, like I said, when John did it, I thought he did an admirable job.
Definitely.
With what he had to work with. And his thing was he wanted to do it based on Bruce's own script notes. He didn't want to add his own cuts in or changes and things like that. And then my other friend, Alan Canvan, he did one that was called a Bruce Lee Redux that came out on one of these box sets. And then he just did another one, like a Redux 2.0, and asked me again, like, I'm not sure if you're aware, but if you look at the 1978 version of Game of Death, which is terrible, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, all of Bruce Lee's fighting yells and screams, that is me. I did that in 1978 for Paramount.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So anyway, the only reason I'm prefacing that is because Alan contacted me about a year and a half ago, and and was redoing it or redoing his redux and asked me if I would do the yells and screams again, because apparently he really liked the way I did them for whatever.
That's cool.
So the first version in 1978, I was a Paramount or one of the, but anyway, I was on this sound stage with a 30 by 50-foot screen watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And on the Redux, I was on my computer doing it on my iPhone.
Yep.
So
technology.
Anyway, yeah, technology. So I would have liked to have seen it. The only thing that gets me, and I know it's part of just the AI, is like I saw something the other day and it's an AI image of Bruce, and then they AI his voice, and he's doing some of the philosophical quotes. The only thing that gets me is there's so many younger people now that believe that's actually him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because they were not around. So they go, well, look, I've got Bruce Lee told. That's not him. That's not his voice. AI.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that kind of gets me about that is I know that I'm not watching something real.
Yeah.
They don't.
True. Very true.
You probably have had people ask you about that silly commercial where Bruce Lee playing ping pong.
Yeah, I've told so many people, no, it's not really him. He never did that. They don't believe it.
Oh yeah. And I go, no. I go, wait, let me ask you a question. When did cell phones come out? I mean, the really ones like Nokia, like 1980. Bruce died in 1973, and he never did any things playing ping pong.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's very hard getting people to believe that because of the world we live in. No, that was him. That's not him. It's not him.
That's crazy.
In the re-release Enter the Dragon.
Yep.
Right, where they put the philosophy scene back in, right?
Yep.
Do you remember?
Oh yeah.
The new version.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not Bruce talking. That's John Little.
Okay.
There's a voiceover that whole scene where yes, teacher. A good fight is like a play.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't exist. Roy Shaw did his version again via phone. But John ended up doing that one because he was doing the documentary. So, okay, that's what it is. But so seeing it, I know I'm not watching anything real. That's the difference. So
yeah, agree. That's
and
cool.
you said these games, the whatever the stuff in the games. Yeah. Wow, it's incredible.
It is. Yeah, it is. Final question. This one doesn't have to be a martial arts movie. Any movie you've seen in your whole life, favorite movie fight scene? Is there just one fight scene that just popped into your head when I asked that?
Favorite movie fight scene? Oh, I'm just trying to think. There's been so many movies.
Yeah. People pick anything from Rocky to Marvel to Star Wars to John Wick, everything.
Okay, there's a movie, and it might not be so bad. I mean, might not be so good now, and it was not a popular movie. And this is when I say it, it's a terrible fight scene in terms of why and how it takes place. And it was a movie that I think William Friedkin, who did The Exorcist, he did a movie called The Ninth Configuration.
Oh.
And it had Stacy Keach in it.
Okay.
And it's about this, looks like a castle, looks like it's in Bavaria, but it's in Seattle or outside of Washington somewhere. And it's where all of these military people who have had breakdowns are sent for recovery. And the story is that Stacy Keach comes in and he's the new psychiatrist there, and he's working with them, and he's going all these different routes with people, and it's upsetting some of the people. But anyway, he works with them, and there's one of the main characters there. His story was he was supposed to go to the moon, and on the Apollo thing, and he freaked out before. And his whole thing is, what if there's nothing after this? And that's to do with the name, Life to the Ninth Configuration. Anyway, the whole thing is that you're watching this movie, and the guy runs away, and then he gets there's a group of bikers at this bar in some little podunk place there, and they get this military guy, and they're abusing him all kinds of ways and doing stuff. And Stacy Keach comes in to just find him and says, "I'm just here to get the guy," and blah blah blah. And the guy's like, "You're fine as long as he berates him, and he makes him like drink beer off of his foot. He does all of this stuff to him, and then he hits him, and all of a sudden you see Stacy Keach's face change, and a grin comes on it. He comes up and he grabs this guy's hand, and he crashes a beer glass in his hand. And then basically it's a fight scene, and he kills everybody in the bar, all of the bikers. I mean, and it's just brutal. I mean, bang. And anyway, the whole crux of the story is that he's not a psychiatrist in reality. He's a patient who was sent there. His nickname in Vietnam was Killer Kane, and he had had like 20 some confirmed barehanded kills. And this was his, and then he freaked out, cut off some kid's head, and then the head talked to him. So he had a breakdown. So he was sent to this castle, but his therapy was to pretend to be a therapist and help these guys. So anyway, It's a long way around, but it's a violent scene.
Yeah.
But as far as brutality, there's so many good movies.
Yeah.
Hero is a great movie.
Yes.
Again, Chow Yun-fat, as I said, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is one of my favorite movies. And watching him do martial arts and knowing he had so little martial art training, but moving with the sword, it's so real.
Yeah.
If they're good fight scenes, it's great.
I like it. Great answer. Yeah. Before I let you go, Chris, is there anything that we just want to get out there really quick, last minute parting words before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, I've enjoyed this podcast immensely. And again, talking, my whole thing for myself is that I like to say this: Bruce Lee ignited the flame of martial arts in me. Growing up, spending time with Dan helped nurture that flame and helped me to develop into a teacher. He laid the groundwork because of his thing. So, there's a saying about some debts cannot be repaid, they can only be acknowledged. Yeah. And so both of those, the only way that I can acknowledge that is to do the best that I can and share Jeet Kune Do and what it means to me to the best of my abilities. And that's basically it. As I said, it's all I want to do is share ideas, share thoughts. I don't ask people to agree with me or think like I do. I just want to be able to share with people openly and honestly.
I like it. I'm hoping, like I said, next time I drive out to Utah, maybe we can take a side trip to Idaho and pop in and see your school. It'd be kind of fun to meet in person. So.
Yeah, well, that would be wonderful. That'd
awesome.
Be great.
Well, I appreciate your time. Like I said, once again, October 16th, your episode will be out, and I think the listeners are really going to enjoy this one.
Well, I hope so. Like I said, it's a pleasure talking. We covered things that I like talking about, and some brand new things that I've never talked about before. And now I'm going to have to sit there and figure out some of this stuff so that if other people ask me, I'll know what to say. I won't be going, So
seriously, it's been fun. I truly, truly appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Again, best of luck with the podcast.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.